amiguitos, bienvenidos a un nuevo episodio de Rock Invasion Entrevistas. Hoy tenemos a un invitado súper especial, tenemos a Bacchi de Hittman, un grupo mitiquísimo, madre mía, que todavía no me puedo ni creer que se hayan reunido y que sacaran el año pasado ese pedazo de disco que es Destroy All Humans. Así que, bueno, pues tenemos el placer de tenerle con nosotros aquí en la nave y vamos a ver qué se cuenta Jim. Hi Jim, how are you?
Oh, good. How are you? That was beautiful.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm doing great. It's a great pleasure having you here today. You know, it's
Pleasure to be here.
it's almost unreal for me, you know, having Hittman on the show and knowing that there was a reunion, a new album. It's unreal.
That's great. I'm glad. Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, Hittman was formed back in '84 in New York, right?
It's correct. Yeah,
Okay.
1984. Myself and Mike Bucell, the late Mike Bucell, and Chuck Corey. Well, Mike and I had a band, two bands previous to Hitman. One band was called Attila, who later put out a record. I forget what the record was called, but a band Attila was a three-piece like power metal type of band. A Rolling Thunder, I think, was the name of the album. And we left that band. We started another band called Raid, and that's where like Metal Sport and the Hitman theme and Live for Tomorrow were all Raid songs. And that didn't work out with that singer. Wasn't the right guy. The drummer wasn't the right guy. So we then found Chuck Corey, and started what the basis of Hitman would be. And it took us we had one singer originally, a singer named Scott Knight, who was in a band called Armed Forces. They had a record out too. And he's the one who actually came up with the name Hitman. He's like, I got a list of names. I like this one, Hitman. We'll use two. So we decided to do it with two T's. So Scott was in the band for a while, but he wasn't the right singer. So then we put out an ad, and we eventually found Dirk at about I'd say spring of 1985, maybe summer. And we got right to work. We had some songs written already we'd been working on. We worked on some stuff in the rehearsal room and went straight in to do a recorded demo. So that was probably in I want to say the summer or maybe fall of 1985. And we had our first show soon after that. We brought in another guitar player, Don Fair. And our first actual show was opening for Stryper on November 11th, 1985. Sold out shows, like probably 1,000 people, sold out. I think they were on the Yellow and Black Attack tour. And that was our first show. So that was a good first show to have. So that's where it all started. And then after that, you know, we started headlining Lemoore East and opening up for other bands and playing with, you know, Liege Lord early on, you know, Fate's Warning early on. You know, we played with Saxon. We played with Stryper a couple of times. And eventually kept playing more. We opened up for Poison when they first came out, which was entertaining and memorable. And yeah, we just that's kind of how we got started. You know, it once we got our first gig, things started to happen a little kind of quickly. So yeah.
Wow, that's awesome. You know, opening for a Stryper. Come on.
Yeah, I know. It was pretty awesome.
Yeah, and then you got
And we did
signed.
really well. So
Yeah, and then you got signed to the German label Steamhammer, which.
yeah, that took a little while. We we had a lot of interest due to tape trading back in the day, probably before you were born. People used to trade cassettes. You know, we would send. The first thing I did was I sent our demo to Metal Forces and to a couple other fanzines over there. We got a really good Metal Forces review. Thank you, Dave Reynolds, if you're out there. Who became a real big supporter of the band, and then people started buying our demo, and then the tape trading. You know, that's how it happened. People trade tapes. So, oh, I got this, I got that. They have lists. tape trading was the way you got heard. And so we ended up getting, I knew that our audience would be better for us in Europe based on what I was reading in the fanzines, a lot of bands similar to what we were doing. So I immediately went for the European fanzines because fanzines are more accessible than a big magazine like Kerrang. You're not going to get a review in Kerrang with a demo. But in Metal Forces, they had a whole section called Demolition, and it was all bands' demos. So that's kind of how we got started. And Steamhammer came along later, probably 2.5 years later. We then, after the initial demo, which we didn't really love the sound of, we went and recorded what was going to be our own 6-song EP. So it was Metal Sport, Dead on Arrival, Backstreet Rebels, Test of Time, Behind the Lines, I think, and one other song. I forget what they were, but it was originally going to be a 6-song EP. And then our manager started talking to Steamhammer, and they said, well, we'd be interested. We're interested in you guys. He said, okay, but we need an American label. So they said, well, we were thinking about having a SPV USA. It was SPV Records. And we're thinking about opening a U.S. office. So our manager said, well, if you open a U.S. office, we'll sign with you. So they said, okay, and they did. They opened an office in in New York, about 5 minutes from our drummer's house. And we ended up going and recording 3 more songs, 4 more, but we didn't get to finish the 4th one due to budget. And then I mixed the sound at Mars Sound in Tampa, which became the home of death metal, Florida death metal. Mars Sound, and actually to the point of I was doing the daytime sessions, and at night a couple times I ended up hanging out with Rick Ross from Death, because they would do the 6 to 2 shift for their recording, and we were whatever till 6 o'clock. I was there mixing, so I ended up talking to him a bunch of times because he was in the session right after us. And I guess eventually they became like the home of Florida death metal, Mars Sound Studios, which I find kind of interesting. But yeah, so we went in and did that ended up being 9-song album for Steamhammer. So, and then here's where it gets ugly. We were supposed to release our record. I don't remember the exact date or anything, but the day our record was supposed to be released, the people running the American label called SPV and said, we're taking all the money out of the account and closing up. And it was literally like the day our record was supposed to be out. So my drummer's over there looking in the window of the warehouse, seeing people running around. There's some real shady stuff going on. And apparently the 2 guys, one of them I knew, running the label, just took the money and just said, so our record didn't come out on Steamhammer. It got licensed to Roadrunner, or Road Racer, and we had been speaking to them previously about a deal, and we didn't want to work with them because we didn't think they were the right company for us. They had big contracts with 7 records, so they weren't supposed to. They had kind of illegally licensed our record to another company, and we kind of fought them on it. And so when the record came out, we didn't support it because our lawyers were like, no, because we had major label interest. We had a couple labels wanted to sign us, big labels. And SPV said, well, we want $1 million for the band if you want to sign the band. So they were all like, are you crazy? It's a baby band. They're new. We're not spending $1 million on this record that cost you pretty much nothing. So, and we got into a big legal thing, and that's where kind of Hittman fell through the cracks. At least I know in Europe, I believe the record was doing really well, but we weren't working the record in America, and we weren't in Europe. So things just we hit a big stumbling block. So that's what happened with that first album. And that's why Hittman never toured Europe and never got any bigger, because we were fighting with SPV. So that's what happened.
Wow.
Yeah, it's crazy. Wow. It's a crazy, horrible story. But, looking back, because Road Racer was working the record to radio like in America, we got #1 most added on all the specialty metal shows in America. And Rose Racer was trying to work with us, but we were told by our lawyers, like, no, we got to stop this record from coming out. And, in hindsight, I don't think it was a good idea. I think we should have worked with what we had as opposed to what we were hoping to get, And that was my kind of first real valuable music business lesson is work with what you have and not with what you think you or hope to have. So that's kind of what happened with Hittman early on. So
Okay. I think that there's a pretty cool thing inside that album, and it's the inner sleeve, where there's a almost hidden statement in one of the bottom corners that says, "This album was made with absolutely no hair extensions."
That was our drummer Chuck. He even had a shirt made that had no hair extensions. It was just a funny thing because people were getting hair extensions and we were all proud to have super long hair. It was just one of those silly things that he decided if he wanted to put on there. It was funny, but nothing deeper than that. Like, we don't have hair extensions. We all have our real long hair and blah, blah, blah. That's all that meant.
Yeah, I love that. I love, when it comes to funny things, I love when bands are in such a good mood to add such a statement.
Yeah, well, we were, look, we were a bunch of clowns at the end of the day, so, we had to keep it funny to keep ourselves sane,
Yeah, that very first album, the self-titled album, was, I don't know, it's one of my favorite US metal albums with great songs. Metal Sport, Breakout. Metal Sport, by the way, was featured in what's the name? Stranger Things.
Yes.
How was that?
The demo version of that song,
exactly.
Too. From the 1985 demo. That wasn't even the album version. So, yeah, I guess I could tell you how that happened. I do like music for TV, mostly for a living. I have a library of music and TV shows use it. And I have music supervisor, music consultants that speak to these music supervisors on shows and they provide them with music. And one of my consultants that I work with, he specializes in period-specific music. He started doing that. And he's like, give me all your old stuff that you have from your bands in the 80s, because like the 80s are super hot right now, and I'm getting a lot of requests for it, and it has to be from the 80s. It's not sounding like it's from the 80s. Like, so he went around to all his buddies that are in bands and said, give me your old demos. I can get this stuff placed. So I gave him all of the Hittman stuff, and that's what they ended up using. They ended up using the demo version of Metal Sport for that scene. But we've had a bunch of, from both records, Vivas Machina and the debut, we've had lots of placements in the, probably the last 2-3 years of Hittman getting placements, because all of these shows are going retro 1980s. So they want actual music from the time. And it is kind of hard to replicate that 80s sound. It's very specific, especially like independent bands that didn't have a lot of money. Their recordings, like our recordings, weren't that great. Well, at least the first album, it was all kind of done ourselves. So to get that kind of real sound, these music supervisors like, no, it has to be from the time period. So that's how that happened. And we've had songs in a bunch of different TV shows and stuff like that, but that seems to be the one that everyone kind of took notice of. I didn't watch the show. I didn't even know about it, and all my friends are like, I've heard Hittman and Stranger Things. I'm like, what's Stranger Things? They're like, you don't know what Stranger Things is? I'm like, no, I don't watch. And then I, of course, went back and watched it, and it's an amazing show. But everybody I knew, because people have kids, and their kids love the show. So when they heard, and it was literally like 20 seconds of Metal Sport in a car, but everyone heard it enough. I certainly recognized it. So, yeah, it was pretty cool. And then once I became a fan of the show, I was like super happy to have a song in there, you know. So yeah, that's how that happened.
That's great. Yeah, I'm a Stranger Things fan, and I was watching it, and I was like, wow, it's not possible. It's Hitman. It's Hitman. I was so happy because
Yeah.
normally I expect when it comes to these shows, I expect to listen to Rat or to some things that were way more popular, so to say. Um, but then Hitman, I was so happy, like wow, this is true. This is the 80s. They got that right.
Yeah. Well, you know what's funny about that is a band like Rat would cost a lot more money to get their track. So what my this music consultant that I work with basically says, well, I have these bands that were all of that era, but they're not Rat or Motley Crue that are going to cost you, $30,000 to get a placement. I can do it on a budget and still have that sound because God knows everyone had a band in the '80s and had their demos. So uh, that's kind of because those to get music to get Rat or a Motley Crue or a Whitesnake or whatever, you need a pretty big budget. So, and Stranger Things did have a lot of big budget songs in there, but they can't fill it with all big budget music because it would be cost too much. So they get the guy driving in his car listening to some random '80s metal, and that song is '80s metal to the to its core. So,
Exactly,
so
exactly. And then there was in between the two albums, in between the self-titled one and Vivas Machina, you were supposed to release another album. I think that was going to be called Precision Killing.
yeah.
You made some demos. Whatever happened to those demos? Because I think that Vivas Machina is a good album, but there was no transition. So I can understand that some people who have listened to the self-titled one and then go and listen to Vivas Machina are like,
People were mad. They weren't happy. Um, yeah, Precision Killing basically was because it took a while between writing the original batch of Hitman songs, many of which ended up on the first album. Uh, it took so long to get that record, the deal, and then put the record out. We were kind of advancing and writing new material, and we had this whole Precision Killing concept for an album. And by the time the debut album came out in 1988, we had already were on that path to do that, and then all these legal things happened. But we did demo. We didn't have that much money to demo stuff, so it was all just rehearsal room cassettes and all that. But I will tell you that two of those songs, at least one of those songs, ended up on Destroy All Humans. So, and the second song, two of those songs are songs from Out in the Cold is from 1985, and Code of Honor is from 1986, 87. Code of Honor was gonna be one of those songs that was on Precision Killing. So we got in all that legal stuff, just kind of shut the band down, and it did a lot to us mentally, where we were really frustrated and we didn't know what to do. And again, looking back, hindsight, we probably just should have plowed ahead and just made another record, on our own. But we just didn't have the working business knowledge. We thought no, we have to get out of this record deal so we can get the big record deal, which is being offered to us. So Precision Killing kind of went by the wayside as the years went by. So, but a couple of songs ended up on Destroy All Humans, or at least one of them. So there you go.
That's great. And then moving on to Vivas Machina, I think it's a good album. I really enjoy it, but as I said before, I think it was maybe the I think it was the lack of a transition in between what maybe made people mad. I wasn't mad. I was just well, it's a different side of Hitman, and
Yeah,
there are even songs where where Dirk's voice is just unrecognizable. It's like,
I
is
know.
that the same guy? Like, I have to say that he did a great vocal work on Vivas Machina. There's a lot of different things, and some notes that he hits on some of the songs are just wow. It's a great vocal work, I have to say.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah. So um, the other problem we were going through in 1988, 89, 1990 is by the time we started in 1985, kind of the beginnings of the tail end of what traditional metal was, right? Judas Priest and Maiden and all that stuff were already super well established. And by 1986, it was all about Metallica, Anthrax, Slayer, Overkill, Megadeth, thrash. And we were more of a traditional metal band. So all of a sudden, to call yourself a metal band, even though we like to be really melodic, we didn't want to be a thrash band. So we kind of got into this in between where we're not melodic enough to be like a hair metal, glam metal band, and we're not heavy enough to be a thrash band. So we were in that kind of area where a lot of bands found themselves. Fate's Warning, Armored Saint, they were all in that. We're not a thrash band, we're not a commercial hard rock band, and we got to the point where not having all the legal issues, and we saw all our friends get record deals and go on tour and all this stuff, and like we're sitting there and like nothing's happening. So I think we just said, you know what, we got a different manager, and we said, let's just try doing some more commercial stuff so we can get a record deal. I mean, it was really as simple as that for me. It's like, you know what, I'm tired of not being heavy enough, to be a metal band anymore. And I don't want to be super heavy. I want to be more melodic. So we went in that direction, thinking we could maybe get a bigger record deal. And it was done for all the wrong reasons, but mostly out of frustration because we didn't know what else to do. I think because, again, we're in America, and America's one big thing, MTV and all this stuff. And in Europe, I know that the fans in Europe were more stick to what they really like, and they didn't really care about trends. And I think I always say, had we gone to play in Europe and after the first album, after 1988, 89, and saw that we actually had a fan base, because we had a considerably larger fan base in Europe than we did in America. And we seen that we had people that loved what our first album was. It would have given us more of a reason to feel like, okay, we can continue with this. But in America, you're watching the trends go this way and that way, and we're in the middle. So we felt like, well, nobody really cares about us anymore. This is frustrating. And we didn't know that we had this kind of growing fan base in Europe. So we did a lot of things for the wrong reasons. We also wanted to try a lot of things, and it was also 5 years between records. So everything changes. The music business was changing so fast. We were changing tastes. Dirk really got into Queen, and, I really got into, the Beatles, and we loved Queensryche. So you hear a little bit of all of that stuff on that record. Dirk likes to say that's more of like a fifth Hitman record than a second one. And he may be right about that, where it's like, yeah, had we kept making records, we may have evolved to what Vivas Machina became. But like you said, the transition, there was no transition. So there are songs on there that I just like, I wish I'd never put on there. But, it happened. We were basically frustrated and not really knowing what to do. So that being said, there are some good songs on that record that I still really stand behind. I love Radio Waves. Answer My Prayer was kind of a cool song. It had a little bit of the funk thing in there that was happening that I'm just like, yeah, that's kind of very 1990. And a few of the songs, Listen was a pretty cool song. But I think we went a little too far into the commercial rock territory, and probably, like I said, we didn't really know anybody cared at that point. Because in America, if where you are right in front of you, no one really cares, then you think no one cares. So in our world, we're seeing, the big heavy bands getting heavier and more extreme, and the commercial rock getting more extreme in that direction. And we're like, well, which one do we do? Where do we go? So it was difficult. It was, a very confused, and we were arguing amongst ourselves about what to do sound wise. So it's a tough album for me, on a personal reason too, because the entire time we were making that record, my mom was dying from cancer at the same time. So I'm going to the studio every day and coming home and seeing my mother getting sicker and sicker, and I was still living at home. And for me, that album will forever be scarred by that experience, because literally the second to last day before we were done mixing, I came home and my mom died that morning. So she basically, in my mind, waited for me to finish the record before she went. But it was really a really tough time for me. So it's really hard for me to even listen to that album still to this day without getting some of those ugly feelings. So I tend to not think of that as a Hittman album at all. It's just something else that happened. But I know it's funny because in recent years, when we've been doing these couple festivals we did, and people brought that record to sign, a lot of people and online also have told us, like, I didn't like that when it came out, but I like it now. It grew on me. So I don't know. It's definitely a mixed bag in terms of styles. So there's no kind of common thread going through the style. Sounds like four different bands. So yeah, it's a weird album. So.
Yeah, wow, that was really interesting. Really interesting. And what happened after Vivas Machina?
After Vivas Machina, during Vivas Machina, during the writing stages and then the recording stages, grunge happened. So grunge, metal, and even the biggest metal bands were struggling, the Anthraxes and the Slayers and whoever else. That was a bad time for metal. If you were in a metal band, all of a sudden metal was not cool anymore. MTV and Rolling Stone magazine are talking about Nirvana and Soundgarden and Pearl Jam. And so by the time we did one tour of Europe for Vivas Machina, and we played to mostly not a lot of people, but we had a great time. We came home and we kind of were like, well, what do we do now? And I had already started making plans to move to California. So 1994, at the end, 1995, I moved to California. We were kind of just like, well, that's it. There's no other way out for us right now. There's no way people are listening to metal right now, especially even if we went back to our traditional, first album metal sound. That at that point was so uncool that you couldn't really do that, at least not in America. I don't know what was going on in Europe, but it was just kind of, the train had left the station. People were into different music now. The younger kids coming up were into grunge and alternative rock and whatever. And, a lot of metal bands suffered and we kind of reached the end of our run. So we didn't break up. We just kind of said, well, I'm moving to California, so I'll see you guys, and that was kind of that, and I had started doing different things musically myself with other bands. So I was, getting into some different music. So that's kind of what happened. And then a lot of years in between of nothing. So.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. In Europe, yeah, there was all of this alternative rock trend too. But at the same time, in the early 90s, there was this huge Norwegian black metal scene and all of this death metal scene. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. That was huge.
Not something that we could participate in, as Hittman. We weren't into black metal or death metal or anything. I mean, it just wasn't. It was either that extreme metal or nothing. you know. So we're like, no. All the hair bands cut their hair, pretended to be alternative rock. You know, in the 90s kind of sucked for metal. So
Yeah, they did.
they did.
They
So
did.
that was that. That's kind of all there is to say about that, you know.
Yeah. Um, yeah, I remember reading some interviews back in maybe 2014, 15, 13, more or less. And I remember reading, no, 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 a reunion, that would be a no go, especially after Mike passed away.
Yeah.
Um, that was really sad. Yeah, and I remember reading that and feeling so sad that this reunion would never happen, that there would never be a new tour or even a new album. That was something that for me was completely impossible. But then we jump to 2017, and Hittman has its reunion with some new members, but with some members of the original lineup too. Um, and then comes the first studio album in 27 years with Dirk, with John, and with you still there, together with a couple of new members.
Yeah.
So how was that? I was so happy. You know, it's just it's just amazing because I was a lot into all of this US power metal scene. And I discovered that thanks to the internet. Because, yeah, I remember it was almost impossible to get a copy of your first album. You know, because, yeah, I was like 14 or 15, something like that.
Well,
So I remember listening to Hitman on YouTube and on different platforms, but being totally unable to find a copy. So that was the way that, for example, I discovered Hitman, I discovered Glacier, Chastain,
right.
all of those great US metal bands. So
Yeah.
I was really happy to hear about the reunion and then about the new album. How did that happen?
Um, well, it's funny. If you go back a few years before that, in 2000, I think, and I want to say 2008 or no, we were supposed to play 2009, Keep It True. Well, we got asked. And I, at the time, had no interest in that. I was like, nah, we were all I was living in California. You know, Chuck was living in Arizona, Nevada, rather, Las Vegas. The other guys were in New York. They hadn't played. And I was like, I just had no interest in it, you know. And then a couple of years later, Mike passed away, and we all went to the funeral, and it was really sad, of course. But we did talk about, like, you know, we should do something. We should re-release the first album. We should maybe do something new, and so yeah, we talked about it a little bit. We kept in touch. We've always kept in touch. You know, it was kind of like a family. And then I don't know what happened. I was having an online Facebook conversation with somebody talking about something, and Dirk chimed in, and I guess Dirk had done an interview about with some magazine or blog or something about Hitman, and I guess Oliver from Keep It True read it, and he said, I'm going to ask again, because the first time we were on the flyer and everything, we were on the bill, and then I said, I can't do this. I don't know who accepted this gig. I said, I don't want to do it. I know Mike doesn't want to do it. I think Dirk may have said yes, and I'll convince the guys. I'm not sure. But I was like, no, it's going to cost us too much money to fly around, 3,000 miles apart. But after Mike passed away and the opportunity came up, Oliver reached out to Dirk and said, hey, I still would love for you guys to play Keep It True. And Dirk reached out to me, and I said, you know what? It's time. Let's do it. I was totally on board with doing it. I just wasn't ready. My musical headspace and all that. I just kind of wasn't really ready to do it. Wasn't interested. I was doing other things. So when the opportunity came up, I was like, yeah, go to Germany and play a festival. Sure. We had to find a bass player. Um, and I spoke to my friend Greg, who was a friend of Mike's, a childhood friend of Mike's. Grew up in the same town, went to the same school, learned, was influenced by the same bass players, Steve Harris and Geddy Lee and all that. And he was like, sure, that sounds kind of cool. So we also knew that the 30th anniversary of the first album was coming up, and we got a couple people asked us, can we reissue the album? I thought it would be a good idea. And No Remorse approached us and said, we'd like to put the demo on there too. And I said, sure, of course. I think if nothing else, that demo getting out there in a clean copy was worth it to do that, because I actually saw a copy of that demo, the cassette demo, sell on eBay for over $400. I was shocked. I was like, who's paying $400 for our crappy demo, like from 1985? So I said, okay. Ends up that Dirk found the master tape multi-track. So I was like, okay, I'm going to remix this and make it a little better. So we remixed it, remastered it. The original mastering of the Hittman album was so good from the Japanese version that I have. I said, let's just keep that one. And we did a re-release for 2018, 30-year anniversary. And we played Keep It True. And, we went back with four of the original members. Me, Dirk, John, and Chuck. Four of the original members. Pretty good, considering a lot of the bands you see there from 30 years ago have one original member or two. We did, 4 out of 5 is not bad, and the fifth one would have been there had he been alive. So that was a lot of fun. It was pretty amazing to go up in front of a crowd of 3,000 people and hear them singing songs you wrote when you were 21 years old. It's pretty mind-blowing and emotional. You could see, if you see the videos of that, how we're reacting. We were all just like, oh my God, we were really taken aback by that. So immediately when we took the offer to do the gig, I told Dirk, we all have studios at home. We got to make a new record. We got to kind of set the record straight for Vivas Machina, because we know that a lot of people really didn't like that record, that liked our first record. Like, let's make our new album that's really going to be what people originally loved about the band. So in my mind, I was like, we're playing a show, we got to make a new album. So that's kind of how it started, and we set out to make a new record, and of course we did. And, here we are. So with that, but the experience of playing the festival and signing records, and some of the people bringing their records were as old as we are. I'm like, I waited 30 years to see you guys. This is amazing. And so, we did tour Germany in 1994. We were here, just no one came. So, but anyway, it was a great experience, and we're super excited about it. It was really a lot of fun. So.
That's great. I have to say that I was pretty scared about the reunions, because I've seen a lot of bands reunited and playing songs here, playing gigs here in Spain, and in me attending to their shows and ending up so disappointed. Like, hey, why would you ever do that to yourself as a musician, And but in 2020 I had to shut my mouth up, because you came back with a new album. Glacier came up with a new album too, which was great, was amazing. They are signed to No Remorse too, I think. So I was so happy, but I have to say that, at the first moment I was a little bit scared, and like, let's see what these guys are going to release, because one does never know about these reunions. But as I said, in 2020 I had to, suck my own words and never talk again about bad reunions. That makes me happy. That makes me really happy.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because when we started writing, uh, and we're talking like end of 2016 or 2017, end of 2016, because we knew we were going to play 2018. Um, Keep it true. So 2017, me and Dirk got to work writing songs, and in my mind, I said, let's write an album that kind of is from the influences that made us want to start Hitman. Not Hitman itself, but more late 70s, early 80s metal. Rainbow, early Scorpions, early Judas Priest, Maiden, that stuff, and less of the 80s. I want to have a more older kind of very traditional new wave of British heavy metal sound. So we wrote a bunch of songs, and when we were compiling songs for the record, we sent everything to No Remorse, and they basically came back and said, okay, these 5 songs are really great. These other ones are good, but they're not, like, if we want to say Hitman is back, you really have to do something in the style of your first record. That's what all the fans want. And we're like, wow, okay, keep in mind, we're in our mid 50s, and you got to kind of, well, I got to go back and find that 22-year-old version of myself and think how he would write a song. But basically, I said, well, we have these 2 songs demoed that are old songs we wrote back in, 85 and 86, 87. And I sent them to him because I demoed them recently. I said, let's just demo these songs just because we've never done them properly. And we sent them to him. He's immediately like, these have to go on the record. He goes, all we need is 8 songs. So he said, these 5 are great, blah, blah, blah. So we ended up settling on 8 songs. And the whole attitude towards that album, really came from the label saying, no, stop looking over here. You got to be Hitman in 1988. You have to use that. That has to be your superpower. That's what you have to be. So, okay, fine. So we basically made an album for the fans of that record. And we know that that's what people, when people look back in the history of metal and when they talk about Hitman, that's the album they're talking about. They're not interested in Vivas Machina. They like it. Some of them do. But we knew that we had to really just kind of hone in on that sound. So I think we got pretty close, and made it sound a little modern. But, a lot of people I played it for. Sorry, I'm going to close the window. Gardeners are here with their leaf blowers. When I played it for people that were not real, just super fans of traditional metal or anything like that, they're like, wow, man, this really brings me back. So I know we kind of captured that old style with an updated sound. We even went as far to use Bob St. John, who produced Vivas Machina. We got him to mix because he's an amazing mixer. And Dirk's like, we should go to Bob because he's an incredible mixer. It's all he does now. So like, okay, we talked to Bob, and Bob was like, I'd love to work with you guys again. So we did go back to part of our past with that as well. So I think the goal at the end of the day for the label and for us was to make something that really was like the first Hitman album stylistically. And I think we kind of did that. So
I think so too.
Yeah. Good. I'm glad it worked.
Yeah. I'm really curious about the lyrics in Total Amnesia. What what's that about? I mean, yeah, we can even hear some echoes of metal sport in the song, but the lyrics, what can you tell me about those lyrics?
Well, it stems from a phone conversation I was having with Dirk. We were talking about we were going to play Up the Hammers, in Athens, and Armored Saint was on the bill, a band I always really liked. And I said to Dirk, I go, wow, this is great. We finally get to be on a bill with Armored Saint after all these years. And he's like, what are you talking about? We opened up for Armored Saint. I'm like, no, we didn't. I would have remembered that. And he's like, because this kind of thing where we would talk about back in the day, we'd have these conversations. Remember when we did that photo shoot? And I'm just like, don't remember anything about it. Remember when we did this? Don't remember. And I'm like, I think that stuff I went through recording Vivas Machina and my mom being sick and passing away at the end of it, I think I just got this huge memory block for Hittman stuff, because it was just like a lot of, all the bad business stuff that happened. I think I just kind of blocked it out. So Dirk's like, what are you talking about? He went on setlist.com and found the exact date and the show. And oddly enough, another friend of mine's band was on the bill with us too. So I was like, wow. And now I remember, like, yeah, we hung out with them and blah, blah, blah. We played that show. I don't remember doing, in my mind, I just didn't remember it. And I just literally the next day wrote that song about how I don't remember anything. So there's actually like 4 Hittman songs in the middle of that. There's like a little piece of Breakout. There's a little piece of Answer My Prayer. There's a little piece of Caught in a Crossfire. And there's a little piece of Metal Sport. And I kind of, when I wrote the song and demoed the song, I put that whole amnesia section in the middle with all this kind of like, oh my God, that type of thing. And it kind of really drove home the point of the song, which is, wow, all this stuff I don't remember that happened, and he does and I don't. So that's what that song is about. It's about me just forgetting everything about Hittman that happened. So that's where that comes from. A phone call.
Yeah. So it's been already 7 months since the release of Destroy All Humans. And, with the perspective of 7 months later, how do you feel about this new album?
I was really super happy with it, which is, I've never been really super happy with either of the Hittman albums, from Sonic, whether it's sonically or songs. With the first album, sonically not happy with it. With the second album, sonically great, but the songs, looking back, it's like, there's a lot of songs on there I probably shouldn't have been and whatever. But this album, I'm pretty much 100% in love with all of it. I love the way it sounds. I love the songs, the guitar work, the vocals, everything. I'm super happy about it. And the reception to it was really great. So I when you make a record, you think you do well, and then you see you get these critic reviews and, they give you a 6 or a 7, and it's like, wow, I thought it's better than that, This album had mostly, 8s, 9s, and 10s. So the reaction to it has been amazing, and I'm super happy about that, because I feel like we kind of set ourselves, we kind of righted the wrong that we did with Vivas Machina in the eyes of the, fans of the band, and we kind of reclaimed our old self. So we kind of like, great, we got to set the record straight, for us. And that was really super important to me, is to get it right and not get it wrong, So judging by the reaction, I'd say we got it right. People are like, I can't believe they still can sound like this. Dirk still sounds exactly the same. The songs everything is right. So I'm pretty happy with it. It's a bummer that we can't go out and play. There's no festivals to be had or anything like that. So now we have to basically, Chris from No Remorse said, I said, what else can we do to promote this album? He says, well, we can do this and this, but really you guys should be working on another album. So in 2022, when everything hopefully opens back up again, you guys will you'll need a new album by then, because this album will have ran its cycle. And it kind of has already, and that's fine. I saw a lot of year-end lists with, Destroy All Humans on it. I was super happy about that. Yeah. So we got back in the game, and that was super important to kind of reclaim what we were, in terms of the musical direction and how people felt about the band. So I feel really good about it personally. So
it's a great album. It's a great album.
Thank you.
It made
Thanks.
it to my top 2020 list, and I know that a lot of the listeners were totally surprised with that album. Like, wow, these guys are back for real.
Yeah, I know. The surprise part was most of the reviewers and the reviews that I read they were like totally surprised at how we managed to go back and sound like that band from 1988 and still be refreshing, refresh it up enough to make it sound modern, but still like, if you think about it, that's 32 years between the debut album and Destroy All Humans. It is pretty amazing if you think about it. We're in our 50s and wow, you can still sing like that. You can still play like that. It took a while for me to get that old dexterity back, for guitar playing wise, because after Hittman, I went to completely different styles of music, and I didn't do all that kind of fast guitar playing and those kind of metal kind of riffs and stuff like that. So it took a while for me to get that back. I'm comfortable with it now. I'm okay. So it did take a while, though.
That's great. So you've told me, about the history of the band with some sad parts, but now I would like you to, think about some funny stories that happened to you on the road while touring. I don't know, something that, looking back, you say, "Oh, that was really fun."
Yeah. Well, I would say, especially the first couple, 3-4 years of the band, first 3 years of the band, we had a lot of fun. Mike was one of the funniest people I knew, and he kept us all laughing, and we were just all of those times were fun. Even when we were hauling equipment and hauling big heavy cases around and whatever, we always had a great time. We're always laughing. Nothing specific comes to mind because I have so much amnesia. I forget stuff, but in general, until the whole SPV thing happened, where our record release got messed up. All of those years leading up were a lot of fun. We kept each other laughing the whole time. And and then when we went on tour for Vivas in Germany, that was a great experience because, I'd never been to Europe. So we got to go all over Germany, a couple places, a couple shows in Switzerland and one in Austria. And it was an incredible trip. We had a great time. The other two bands we played with, it's the only tour we did, by the way, was that one German tour in 1993. We played with a band called Sergeant Fury. I don't know if you know them.
I do.
Great band. Amazing people. Sadly, the singer Mac passed away, and he was a very funny guy. And God, what an incredible singer. We would go out and watch them after we played. And we played with them and Skew Tiskin, and we weren't that buddy with them. We were friendly with them, but they were cool. They were nice people. All 18 or 20 people on a double-decker bus, all I kept thinking was Cliff Burton, on one of those buses. I was like, I was scared, but it was okay. It was fine. There was no incidents. But that whole tour was a lot of fun. And after that, we came back and kind of nothing happened. But we did have a lot of fun early on up until about 1988, and we ran into those legal problems. And then it was, the music business is, the trends are changing. We're stuck in this legal hell. So, 89, 90, 91 were all kind of not great years. But I can't think of anything specifically other than, like, the first time we recorded the very first demo. It's just a weird little anecdote. I remember I was working at a record distributor, and it was a Friday, and we get the new records in our Friday, and Theater of Pain had just come in. The newest Motley Crue album was out. Basically got it before anybody really had it in stores. And I remember bringing it to the recording session because I got off of work Friday, went straight to the studio, and I was like, wow, why are they wearing women's underwear? It was my first question. And I was like, and I remember bringing it to the guys in the studio and saying, this is a new Motley Crue album. And they're just like, after Shout at the Devil, they were all black leather and, And I was like, I'm not sure about this. So that was kind of one where it happened exactly the same day that I got that record. It just come out, and we went into the studio to do what was the first Hitman demo. So that's a weird little memory. And other times playing with Poison, getting girls spraying silly string all over us. It was kind of funny. And we had those good shows with Stryper. We played twice with them. We became a little friendly with them, and we opened for Saxon, which was kind of cool. We opened for Armored Saint, Killer Dwarfs. We played a couple shows of Fates Warning and Liege Lord. Liege Lord became our buddies, and we played with them at Up the Hammers last year, or 2019. And I hadn't seen those guys in years. And I was like, Tony, Matt, we sat and had lunch with them, and we had a great old time. So yeah, that's some of the good stuff I could remember. I don't remember a lot, but a couple things I do remember. That was one of them. So yeah.
That's really cool. And you named a lot of cool bands, like Liege Lord. What a great band. What a great band.
Yeah, it's a great band, great people. And when we were over there in Athens, and it's like, we got to come back to Europe and play together. We got to do a show together. So that might happen, because we did talk to them. Like, if we go to like Greece and maybe Italy, Germany, we'll be able to pull off a little tour with those guys. I think between both of us, we'll get a decent amount of people out, and it would be a great bill, and great people to be with. So I'm hoping that we get to do that at some point, because that would be really fun.
I hope so too. I really hope so too.
And play Spain, of course. Spain's a place I really want to go. And I don't know how much of an audience we have in Spain. I know for us, mostly it's Germany and Greece. Those are the two. And I don't know what the metal scene is like in Spain. We've gotten a few organizers from some smaller festivals asking us if we want to come and play. So hopefully we'll get to do that. I don't know when, but I hope soon.
I hope so too. I have a couple of questions more before saying goodbye. And you said that you've been involved in different projects, and I know two of those projects which are totally different from what you do with Hitman.
Yeah.
One of them is called Cult Stars from Mars. And the other one is called Fast Bubble. What can you tell me about those two projects? Because I think that you have worked with some special guests, like Jeff Scott Soto, for example, or Mike Portnoy, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Fuzz Bubble is the band I had after Hitman. I moved to Los Angeles, and it's all people from New York. But we got a big record deal with P. Diddy's label, Bad Boy. It's power pop, more Cheap Trick, Beatles, kind of hard, not really hard rock, but rock, but very Beatlesque, very Cheap Trick influenced. And we got a big record deal, and the same thing happened with Hitman. They didn't ever put the record out. We made a record with Mike Klink producing, who has done Appetite for Destruction and Guns N' Roses and Megadeth. Worked with a bunch of people, and they never released the record, so I released it myself. That band, I went back to California. Everyone else went back to New York, and we kind of put out another record of all our other stuff. And then, we weren't in the same, not even on the same coast. So, they're on the East Coast, I'm on the West Coast. So, fast forward, 20 years later, we decided to get back together again and record stuff virtually during, when the pandemic kind of happened. And it's basically Cult Stars from Mars is basically myself, the singer from Fuzz Bubble, the drummer from Fuzz Bubble, and sometimes the bass player from Fuzz Bubble. And it became a recording project. And Mike Portnoy is an old friend from back in the Hitman days. And every once in a while, he would post a Fuzz Bubble song on his Facebook page. And he's a big power pop fan. So when everything kind of shut down. I was like, well, Mike's home. I said, you know what? Here's it going. I reached out to him. I said, we're starting to record again as Fuzz Bubble. We hadn't changed, made up a new name yet. Said, you want to play on something? He says, I'd love to. I love you guys. So I was like, great. Okay. So we recorded some new music. I started writing songs immediately, started writing all these songs. And he's like, great. This sounds just like, just like Fuzz Bubble where you left off. And we decided to change the name. Called Stars from Mars is actually an old Fuzz Bubble song. My drummer said, hey, should we keep the name? Because there's all this stigma attached to the bad boy, Puff Daddy and all that stuff. And I said, you know what? I don't want that association anymore. Let's not be that band from the 90s that's making a comeback. I'm already doing that with Hitman. Why don't we call it something fresh, So we settled on Called Stars from Mars. We thought it was a cool name. And the idea with that is it's like a recording project, but like, let's get people. Let's get Mike Portnoy. Let's get Chips Enough. We're friends with him. And so that's why it's been recording and releasing a song at a time. But now we've done about 5 single releases, internet only. And I decided that I want to like hold back the releases and just go straight, just make a finished, do a physical album. So we're working on that now. And Mike is playing on some more songs. But I had this crazy idea that I wanted to do Blinded by the Light. And I heard it in my head. Mark, my singer from Fuzz Bubble, with Jeff Scott Soto, trading off Portnoy on drums. My drummer, Jason, will play bass. And I got a guest keyboard player from the Brian Wilson band, Darian. I got him to play keyboards on it because I knew he could handle the retro thing. And so that was super fun. Like, we did a full video of it. And it's a 7.5-minute song, and it's full. So that was a lot. It's a song we love from the 70s, and so that was fun. We did that, and now we're just recording. Cult Stars is just recording and accumulating material for a album release. So that's what I'm doing now, on top of doing, starting to work on new Hitman material, and my other project, which I've had for my other band, which I've had for like 12 years, which is called the Tikiaki Orchestra, and that's a completely different style of music. That's exotica, lounge. There's no distorted guitar in it. There's no singing. It's instrumental lounge music, like late 50s, 1960s era style music. So I do that. I've been doing that for, 12 years now. So lots of stuff, and all the stuff I do for TV and everything else. So that keeps me, kind of busy. So.
It's great to hear. It's great to hear that you're, still creating things and many different things. I love that. I love that. And I have to say that I am already hyped now that I know that you're working on new Hitman stuff.
Yeah.
I'm hyped already.
Right. Yeah. Me and Dirk we're starting to come up with ideas, because we don't want to do just another straight up traditional metal album. We want to branch it out a little bit, but obviously not like Vivas. But I kind of want to do something a little more progressive, a little more still metal, but just a little more in the progressive direction. Something maybe conceptual. We're not really sure yet. We just have ideas right now. Because I don't know. I mean, as a fan, do you want to just hear us do the same thing over and over again? Or would you rather us kind of push it out a little bit, boundary wise? I don't know. I guess that's a question for you. Like, what would you like to hear in another Hitman album?
What would I like to hear? I have to say that I don't like it when, bands... There's people who tend to confuse having their own sound with repeating themselves over and over and over, Right. So I would like, to have, of course, the Hitman essence, but
Right.
maybe with some new elements. Maybe that's not too easy to do, but yeah, I think that would be great. That would be amazing. like
Yeah.
keeping the essence, but incorporating some new elements. I don't know.
Right.
Hmm.
Okay. Yeah. And that's kind of what we want to do. I feel like, doing the straight ahead traditional metal thing that we do is like we've always been a little bit progressive. I think I just want to be a little bit more progressive and maybe have an 8 or a 10-minute song. Destroy All Humans, and well, that has a long intro, but like Love the Assassin is clocks in at almost about 8 minutes long. So I kind of like the idea of maybe going a little further, maybe doing a full album side of one kind of song concept, like Rush Hemispheres or 2112, something like that. Uh, Definitely not like the commercial rock thing that we did with Vivas. I think if anything, we're going to go a little more progressive and a little less commercial, because let's face it, there's no airplay to be had. If you're a metal band, you're not getting on the radio anyway. If you're an independent metal band, you're really not getting on the radio. So let's just kind of, expand out and, go a little more conceptual. And I think that's what we're going to end up doing. And there'll be lots of traditional metal on there as well. I think maybe the idea of doing a side-long piece and then having a bunch of songs on the second side, I don't know. I just know I want to do something. I want to elaborate on what we've done and go a little further, more progressive.
That
So,
sounds good.
like,
That sounds
yeah,
good. And you will
yeah,
get some airplay on Rock Invasion. So,
yeah. Good, good.
at
Well,
least.
thanks for that. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I don't think I have any more questions for you today, but it was really amazing having you here. And
So much.
you told me a lot of great stories about the band. I think we talked pretty much about everything Hitman.
Yeah.
So if there's anything else that you would like to say to your Spanish fans, you can do it right now if you want to.
Well, hopefully we will get to see you in person one day. I really want to come to Spain. Um, if there's anybody organizing festivals out there, please feel free to contact us. We want to get on more. It's probably for a band like us, um, that's kind of just getting our feet back. We've been away so long, to get on some of those bigger festivals, so we expose ourselves to a bigger amount of people at first, and maybe play a festival, play a couple of shows, play another festival, do a couple of weeks, maybe a 2 week stint over there. But I really would like to get to Spain. I'd like to go back to Germany. I'd like to play Italy. I'd like to play Greece again. Um, and all the other European countries around that we've never got to go. The sad part for us is that we didn't get to play any of Europe until 1993, and only a couple countries. So we know we have some fan base in all of those countries, Sweden and Switzerland and whatnot. So I'm hoping that we can get to do that, before time runs out on us. So, and Spain is definitely a place I want to go. So, for the Spanish fans, I all I could say is that I really hope we get to see you in person, up close and personal. Maybe in 2022 or maybe later this year. Who knows? So, but
Great, great. So thanks again for your time, and I hope to see you soon on the road.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me on this show.